This is Midong Solar Farm. Just 2 years ago, it was nothing but an empty desert. Today, it stretches across an area twice the size of Manhattan and produces enough electricity to power a small country. At first glance, this looks like just another flashy Chinese megaproject, but it's part of something much, much bigger. For decades, China's greatest weakness has been energy. The world's factory runs on oil, but almost none of it comes from home soil. Every day China imports over 10 million barrels of the stuff, most of it passing through waters patrolled directly by the US Navy. One blockade and its economy would grind to a halt. That may sound alarmist, but not to Beijing. Its answer is something no superpower has ever tried before: to build a nation that doesn't need oil. This dot is the Midong Solar Farm, and this is every solar farm in China. Last year, they generated enough energy to power France and the United Kingdom combined, and most of them didn't even exist 3 years ago. But this is just the beginning. China generates even more energy by wind, and even more energy than that by hydro. In early 2025, clean energy made up nearly 40% of its electrical supply. At this pace, China's yearly output will soon rival the entire European Union. And if Beijing can power its economy without imported oil, America loses one of its last major pressure points. And in a world where energy independence means strategic freedom, Taiwan suddenly looks much more vulnerable. Under Biden, the White House fought back, with billions in green subsidies, attempting to take on China at their own game. Trump, on the other hand, has championed a different philosophy. Today I will also declare a national energy emergency drill, baby, drill. While Washington's energy policies shift with each election cycle, Beijing is playing a different game entirely. One that could reshape global power itself. Because if the world's largest oil importer no longer needs oil, what happens to everyone who still does? Amongst other things, China's biggest headache in recent years has been securing reliable access to enough energy to fuel its economy. From potentially retaking Taiwan to escaping the middle-income trap, energy security has been the ball and chain holding China back. Today, they're by far the largest energy consumer in the world, and they're eating through more and more every year. Every nation that uses more energy per person tends to live better, and in China, that demand is still accelerating. Unlike coal, they don't have much either of gas or oil at home. Domestic oil is hard to extract and gas reserves are scarce. So to fill that gap, they have to look overseas. China's energy mix hasn't shifted dramatically, but its total demand has exploded. That surge means it now burns far more oil than ever before and imports far more crude than any other nation on Earth. The same story applies to natural gas. Domestic output can't keep pace, forcing China to become the world's largest importer of both oil and gas. However, importing this much energy comes at a cost. OPEC decisions, wars, and international crises can send the price of oil and gas through the roof at a moment's notice. For China, those price spikes are a problem. That's because, as the world's factory, their economy is still built on razor-thin margins. Those price spikes don't just dent profits. They stall orders, cut shifts, and slow exports. Without a cheap, reliable energy base, sustaining China's next leg of growth becomes nearly impossible. However, this is only one part of China's vulnerability. Currently, over 90% of China's oil and liquefied gas arrives by sea. And those tankers cross contested waters patrolled by the US Navy and its allies. Near Taiwan and across the South China Sea, American ships routinely cut through zones claimed by Beijing, a constant signal of US control over the seas. And then it gets even worse. The route narrows to a single bottleneck, the Strait of Malacca. Almost 80% of China's crude oil from the Middle East squeezes through this corridor. If China ever decided to invade Taiwan and Washington intervened, this strait could be shut down to Chinese shipping, sever the flow to energy, and China's economy goes into meltdown. Refineries lie idle, factories shut, and exports collapse. The Strait of Malacca isn't just a strategic choke point, it's China's Achilles heel. This is known in Beijing as the Malacca Dilemma, and unless they find a solution to it, China is simply too vulnerable to consider taking Taiwan by force. If an American blockade could cripple their economy, the social contract with the Chinese people would be broken, and without a strong economy, the lack of political freedom becomes less justifiable to the general population. That's why achieving energy security is an essential step towards achieving China's foreign policy goals, including their ultimate goal of Chinese reunification. So, Beijing has a serious problem. It has to manage an industrial economy dependent on imported energy, which is priced elsewhere and then shipped through routes it doesn't control. If they ever wanted to seriously challenge America's global dominance, it must first address this problem. Fortunately for China, they're already halfway there. In 2025, only 5% of their electricity came from natural gas, and virtually none came from oil. And since the rest of their electricity comes from domestic sources, they could technically keep the lights on and the grid stable, even if America shut the Malacca Strait tomorrow. So the solution to the Malacca dilemma is simple. Move everything onto the grid. For every machine that switches from oil and gas to electricity, it's one less pressure point that could be turned off in a blockade. And you're already starting to see this happen. Electric and hybrid vehicles now make up a majority of new car sales in China. For energy independence, the importance of this cannot be overstated. Electrifying road travel would almost eliminate China's reliance on oil imports, as well as making China's roads immune to the effects of a blockade. And electrification hasn't just stopped at cars. The same story repeats itself for railways, buses, and electric heat pumps. In fact, China is on track to become the most electrified major economy in the world, having already overtaken the United States and developed European economies. Every step away from oil and gas and towards electricity is another step on the road towards energy security for China. But here's the catch: while this success is helping solve their energy security, it's also making another problem worse. That's because despite all their gains in electrification, their greenhouse gas emissions are still by far the largest in the world. While this may seem contradictory, the main reason is actually relatively straightforward. Most of China's electricity still comes from coal-fired power plants. So, going electric has the unintended consequence of making their addiction to coal more difficult to manage. However, fortunately for Beijing, they have an ace up their sleeves. Because this is where the renewable energy projects that we mentioned at the start of the video begin to come in.